This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to axa.ie. AXA Insurance DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Agri Focus podcast from Agriland that takes a closer look at the issues that matter most to farmers across the country. I'm Francess McDonnell, and in this special episode on the general election, I'm joined in studio by Gary Murphy, Professor at Dublin City University's School of Law and Government. Well, the countdown is well and truly underway to the general election, which will take place on Friday, 29th of November. Over the last few weeks, we've heard promises on what politicians would do if elected on every aspect of daily life, from housing to the economy, childcare, healthcare, and of course, farming and rural issues. But Gary, as the clock ticks, where do we stand at the moment, do you think, when it comes to the polls?
Hi, Francis. It's a great pleasure to be here. We stand on the cusp of a very tight, or the end of a very tight race, which has narrowed considerably in the last week with the slide of Fine Gael in the polls. So just to put it in context, Simon Harris became leader of Fine Gael and Taoiseach back in April, when Leo Varadkar suddenly resigned and unexpectedly. And the Fine Gael vote has been going up since. And it was roughly at about 27% in some of the polls, and now that has gone down considerably, 22% in a Sunday Independent Ireland Thinks poll on the last Sunday of the campaign, and in Monday's Irish Times, the last Monday of the campaign, the Irish Times Ipsos poll had Fine Gael at 19%. So what's happened there is that Sinn Féin have gained slightly to about 20%, and Fianna Fáil are at 20%, give or take. So all the three main parties are in and around 21%. And we then have a large block of independents at much the same level. And we have to see how that will play out when the voters go to the polls, because some independents are much stronger than others, and some have a reasonable chance, and some are complete no-hopers. So if you have four blocks, and then we have what we might call a soft left block, I would describe it as, or maybe soft left, hard left, a block of parties on the on that spectrum. I would say it looks a little similar to 2020, except the main parties were all a little bit higher. Just to give the listeners again some context, Sinn Féin got just shy of 24% of the vote. Fianna Fáil got 22.5% of the vote, and Fine Gael got 22% of the vote. And then that translated to 38 seats for Sinn Féin, 37 seats for Fianna Fáil. 38 for Fianna Fáil, 37 for Sinn Féin, and 35 for Fine Gael. And on these polls, we could be looking at something similar. Now, we have a much larger Dáil, and we can get into that. But yeah, so it's very tight.
Yeah. Last time around, there was a bit of a surprise jump in the Sinn Féin vote. Are we looking at any surprises this time around, or is that not likely to materialise?
Well, I think we have had a surprise in the decline of the Fine Gael vote. I mean, in the Irish Times poll, they were down 6 points in 2 weeks. Now, that is a gargantuan drop in polling terms, literally during the campaign, going from 25% to 19%. I mean, that's a big drop in any terms. And the Fine Gael top brass have certainly been spooked by that. And they're in a desperate race to prop up the core Fine Gael vote, which is probably about maybe 1/5 of the electorate, now down considerably over the course of the last decade since they first came to power, or recently came to power in 2011. So we might have seen the surprise already. On Sinn Féin, I mean, Sinn Féin have had a terrible year since literally last November 2023, after the Dublin riots, when I think most commentators would suspect, or Mary Lou MacDonald called it wrong by calling for the resignation of the Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, and the Garda Commissioner, Drew Harris. Then you had the being on the wrong side of the family and care referendums in March, very poor local and European elections, only at 12% of the vote. And no, that was extremely low, and local and European elections are a little different anyway. Basically not as important, not as many people are as engaged as they are at general election time. So they've had a significant comeback. And I always thought that Sinn Féin would probably be in the high teens or in and around 20-21%. I mean, they do have a formidable leader, Mary Lou McDonnell, who's very comfortable on the canvas. Now, she can have her moments in studio like anybody can, some difficult moments on the camp in studios during the election campaign, Frances, but she's very good on the ground, probably the best, I would say, of the three leaders. And Sinn Féin remain, with a few days to go, quite bullish about their chances of being the largest party. Now, does that mean they can get into government? That's another question.
And do you think it is personality driven when it comes to both on a national stage and on a local stage? And, we've been out and about talking to politicians, looking at the reactions that they're getting, in marts across the country. And it is very tailored, isn't it? There are people who actually either love them or can't stand them. So is this more of a personality driven election this time around, or is that not a factor?
No, I think it is a factor. I mean, let's be frank about it. Most people are not terribly interested in politics, much as it might pain me to say it, as a professor of politics in DCU. And I've taught many politicians from all political parties, and I've tried to interest, generations of students about politics. But I'm wise enough in the two to know that most people are not interested in. They're interested in their everyday lives, their relationships, football, price of beef, whatever.
Yeah.
And politics matters, of course, and it matters to more people at election time. They do get interested in the campaign. So, on whether it's personality or not, a good example would be to look at Sinn Féin in 2020, where we had a whole host of candidates elected with booming first count, first preferences. 20% of the vote for people who in the local elections didn't even get elected 7 or 8 months earlier. What can we put down that to? I certainly think that Mary Lou McDonnell was the dominant figure in the 2020 campaign. And outshone both Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar. I know if we fast forward to where we are today, Fine Gael certainly did benefit from this so-called Harris hop when he became leader in April. But that seems to have dissipated a little bit. But they are losing literally half of their incumbents, 18 of the 35 people who were elected for Fine Gael. So incumbents on the ground, name recognition is important. So whether people will say, oh, that's the Fine Gael candidate and I'm going to vote Fine Gael because I like Simon Harris, I think this is what happened with Sinn Féin. In 2020, a lot of people said, oh, that's the Sinn Féin candidate. I don't know them, but I'm going to vote for the party. I'm going to vote for Sinn Féin. But we know there's significant evidence over many years that name recognition locally certainly helps, whether you're in Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, Labour, Independent, whoever you are. If you have significant name recognition, and this is why posters are up, for instance.
Yeah.
We know some towns, I think Abbey Leaks has a sort of a fatwa on posters, no posters across the town. But I'm in favour of posters because it does give people the opportunity to say, oh, these are my candidates. But if you have good name recognition, no matter what party, and you certainly start with an advantage. And that is the disadvantage for Fine Gael in this particular election, that half of their elected candidates are not standing again.
And also there is a track record of delivering in communities, isn't there, when you have stood before and people recognise if you've brought something or you've delivered and you've made a difference, whereas you're starting from scratch if you're a new candidate in a way.
Indeed, but there is a sort of a counterpoint to that, which would be in 2011, for instance, local delivery stood for nothing for Fianna Fáil candidates when the dominant issue was the economic crash. And we had, 18% unemployment, people having lost their savings in the crash, and incumbency didn't prove any advantage to Fianna Fáil. If it proved, no, it definitely helped some people, but for many of their candidates, they were just washed away in the dissatisfaction with that 2007-2011 government. But certainly, if pointing to a record, it does get one off to a very good start. And what Fine Gael have been trying to do in this campaign is, look, we have full employment, we have a record of achievement, and what Sinn Féin are saying, of course, on the other side, and the opposition, whether it's the Labour, Social Democrats, people before profit or whoever, or independents, is that these people have actually failed us in government. Now, we used to call TDs. There were two types of TDs. We used to say, like in the sort of political science world, but it's not that complicated. Local promoters, those who promoted the constituency, trying to get employment in a particular constituency, for instance, bring foreign direct investment in, and then we had those who considered themselves welfare providers. These were the people who would say, you are entitled to this and I will help you get it. Now, you could have been entitled to it and would have got it anyway, but if you have a local TD who, and this is why TDs run clinics all the time, sometimes in, the upstairs of local pubs or community centres or wherever, because one of the features of being a TD, much different to Britain, for instance, just next door, is if you are a TD, you're on 24/7 call practically, even up to Christmas Day. There are stories of, phone numbers being rung on Christmas Day. I'm like, the heating's gone. What am I going to do? My oven's broken. The turkey is like going off.
Politics is still local when it comes to Ireland.
But and that can certainly help a person that, let's take, for example, and to personalise it a bit, look at the Healy-Raes in Kerry. Michael Healy-Rae did have discussions about going into government in 2016 with Michael Fitzmaurice in Roscommon and others, and they didn't go in eventually, although independents like Shane Ross and Finian McGrath, John Halligan did. We would expect Michael Healy-Rae to top the poll in Kerry.
Comfortably.
Danny Healy-Rae will also probably be elected, and probably comfortably. They're not going to go into government, but have the reputation of getting things done for their constituency. So much so that they're carved up the constituency into two blocks in their literature. Vote, I can't remember which is which, but on the west side, vote Michael, on the east side, vote Danny, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter, but they have in their literature carved up the constituency between the two of them. But they're, I would be amazed. I could be wrong, but I'd be amazed if they end up in government. But that's not mattering to the voters of Kerry, who seem to have made a pact with them that if these people can get things done for us, so much the better.
And is there, do you perceive, still a very much rural-urban divide when it comes to elections? Because the issues now are pretty commonplace right across.
The issues are commonplace, but what has struck me watching Irish politics over the course of the last decade or so, and particularly in this election, the 2020 election, and maybe going back to 2016 when Enda Kenny ran on to keep the recovery going, and a lot of people said, well, there's no real recovery for me after the crash, is a feeling in rural Ireland that it's been left behind. And that the sort of the move east and the sprawl towards Dublin has left rural communities at a disadvantage, and that rural Ireland and those who live in it have been forgotten. Let's put it frankly. This would be the argument that they've been forgotten by a metropolitan elite who is out of touch with the struggles of those who live in rural Ireland. And if you look at the collapse since 2011 of the Fianna Fáil vote, and even the Fine Gael vote from 11 to now. Fine Gael got 36% in 2011. What they wouldn't give for 36% now when they're struggling to get 20%. Why is that? It's because people are unhappy with, even in the era of full employment and very good macroeconomic credentials, they're unhappy with how their own lives are going. Their children can't get a house. They're living with them into their 30s. You have a high cost of rent. Inflation, although inflation has come down, there's still inflation in the economy. We've had massive inflation because of various macro reasons, including the barbaric Russian invasion of Ukraine and the concomitant 120,000 Ukrainians who have moved here to Ireland. So if you're not feeling it on the ground, your tendency is not to vote for the parties in government, and that's what's happened to Fianna Fáil and to Fine Gael. So, if we were recording, I'm old enough to know, if we were recording in the 80s, we'd be looking at Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael on about 80% of the vote between the two of them. And now we're looking at them, they can barely break 40%. That's a consequence of the economic crash. So on rural Ireland, I do think there is, and maybe the Healy-Raes In Kerry, maybe Matty McGrath. In Tipperary, Michael Fitzmaurice. In Roscommon, people like Richard O'Donoghue in Limerick, Matt Shanahan in Waterford. Maybe these people have benefited from that dissatisfaction that rural Ireland has been forgotten by all the parties, and we are the independents who will stand up for you. Now, one could argue, well, you're not willing to go into government to get things done. So, but we know from just the 2020 election, and we know because of the polls tell us that you have 20% of people who are dissatisfied with parties and will vote independent.
So they're on a stronger ticket in certain areas.
I think they are, yeah. And name recognition is very important there.
And we have this new Independent Ireland now, which we didn't have last time around.
We do, yeah. And I mean, it's an odd, in one way, it's an odd name because they are independents. They're not going to run a whip, as far as I understand, but they all are sort of like-minded. And they've been quite strong. I listened to Michael Collins, who seems to be the sort of titular leader in Cork Southwest, and again, who will almost be guaranteed his seat. So they do want to go into government. They do want to make a difference. And you could, I think, see Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, if they were within, you need 88 seats for a majority, but if you're within 7 or 8 seats of a majority, and if these people, I mean, to use the colloquial phrase, if they're bought, they stay bought. If Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael thought that, like they did with the Greens. I mean, people complained about the Greens in one way, but certainly politically, they went into government and they stayed. They got a lot done, or they would argue they did, and they're trying to get back in. And there are talks that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael aren't terribly happy with the Greens. But I could see Independent Ireland, certainly, if they had enough votes, certainly pitching to be in
well, we've
government.
been out chatting to various different politicians, and one of those that we interviewed as part of our GE24 series, and you can see that on our app or on our site, was Michael Fitzmaurice, and he very clearly said, I want to be in government. He even indicated that he quite liked to be the next Minister for Agriculture. So they do have a definite plan there, depending on how they do.
They do, but it's interesting. I mean, the Social Democrats have now said the same. Holly Kearns very strong to say, I want to be in government. Ivana Bacik for Labour has also said, I want to be in government. And I wonder, is that a sense of, okay, it's grand to vote for parties, but if you're not, smaller parties, but if you're not willing to go into government, what's the point?
And there is a declaration there then from those parties.
Yeah, I want to get things done, ergo I have to be in government. This is what the Greens are saying. Oh, this is being a difficult election for them. And I mean, on a good day, they might get 7 or 8 of their seats back, and on a bad day, they might be down to, literally one hand. We simply don't know, because being in government can be difficult if times are bad. And with Trump in the States and all the questions about corporation tax, we could be in for a difficult few years. And if you're in government in difficult years, the omens can be very bad. But I could certainly see, going back to independent Ireland and rural Ireland and those issues, Fitzmaurice, Michael Collins, and others saying, yeah, and there'll be jobs if they're in a coalition. So let's say there's a coalition, something like the current one, except it's independent Ireland rather than the Greens, and they have 8 seats. You'd imagine they'd be looking for 2 cabinet seats, agriculture and could be anything, tourism, the environment, whatever. Couple of junior ministries, and the spoils of office can be a temptation hard to resist.
And Michael Fitzmaurice told us that he wasn't interested in mercs and perks, that he was just going in there to get the job done.
Well, indeed, and they're not. And I genuinely think people are not interested in mercs and perks. I generally do think that, but the mercs and the perks do come with the office, and there is a prestige in being a minister. And if you're at the cabinet table, you can certainly influence things, and if you're not, you can't. And
could they be the kind of bargaining chip there? Because we know we've heard Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael on the subject of Sinn Féin and going into government with them, and if they are looking around to prop a new government up, might that be an option to go down that route? Because that would certainly be a very different composition, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it's independent Ireland, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, as I think from the Greens, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, you're looking at a different tenor on a whole range of issues.
And particularly in climate. and environment, which is a massive issue
the
for
nitrates
farmers.
directive, the climate is a huge issue, and there's a dissatisfaction with the Greens. All the talk of public transport and the difficulties in rural Ireland with public transport, you could see a different emphasis being perhaps put on a government with Independent Ireland rather than the Greens. And I think the sense is if you have independence at about 20%, and I don't want to overstate Independence Ireland's chances either. I mean, we're not looking at dozens of seats or anything, you know. But the independent brand is somewhat strong for the reasons we've been discussing. But if you say you're interested in going into government, and then you've got to step up to the plate during negotiations and say either I'm in or I'm not in because. And not in because sometimes doesn't wash with the public who say, well, I voted for you, I expected you to be in, and now I'm stuck with the Greens or Labour or whoever it might be.
Traditionally, do farmers have a voting pattern?
Well, yes is the short answer, but that's gone. And farmers mirrored in one way the wider population. When Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael were at their sort of zenith, their height throughout the whole of the Irish state from its foundation, and when Fianna Fáil first came and fought elections after their foundation in 26, Fine Gael after Cumann Gael. I mean, you had the so-called 2.5 party state with Labour, but 80% of the vote was Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and farmers tended to vote Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. Fianna Fáil contemptuously used to refer to Fine Gael as blue shirts on tractors. The idea was that Fine Gael looked after large ranchers in Meath and in Golden Vale and Tipperary and places like these, and large beef and dairy farmers. And Fianna Fáil was the party of the old cottier class, or the old sort of renter farmers and small farmers, and those who were struggling, and there was a class bias, and we don't talk about class very much in Ireland, and because the national question sort of dominated, but certainly there was a class basis to farming politics, in my estimation. And even if you look at leaders of the IFA over the years, certainly in the early days, a lot of them did go into national politics for either Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. People like Paddy Lane was from Fianna Fáil, Alan Gillis, who was later in Fine Gael. You had TJ Maher, who was an independent in the European Parliament for a long time. Tom Parlin, more recently, that stopped, or that hasn't been as pronounced, certainly in the IFA in the last numbers of presidents. But yeah, to go back to someone like Tom Parlin, who ran for the PDs and was successful in Laois. I think he is the last of the big sort of IFA people to get involved in farming, or then into national politics. But farmers voted Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. The further west you went, the more likely you were to vote Fianna Fáil. Fine Gael did target the larger farmers and farming communities, and Fine Gael is still residually strong, I think, in wealthier farming communities. Fianna Fáil, I think, less so, but the whole voting patterns have collapsed since the economic crash, both rurally. Even if that's a word, I don't know. Rurally, it doesn't sound like a word. Both in rural Ireland and in urban Ireland. Voting loyalty is, I remember my mother-in-law was from Ballinasloe, and was giving out yards many years ago during the economic crash, and I said something like, Fianna Fáil. She said, I couldn't vote anyone but Fianna Fáil. But I think those days and
that loyalty
is certainly dissipating. Like, party membership has collapsed. I mean, you can't get numbers out of the main political party. They won't tell you.
Yeah.
And because some of the branch membership structure isn't very good. But certainly it has declined quite significantly. We have strong evidence to suggest that there is loyalty to a party is not certainly what it was.
Well, we've been chatting to Elaine Houlihan, who's the president of MACRA, and one of her key messages is that politicians haven't listened to young people in rural communities. You know, there is a struggle with succession. It's a struggle for young farmers to access land. And she said, we've been saying this, MACRA has been saying this for a long time. none of the political parties, in her opinion, had been listening to young farmers. So that dissatisfaction with what was seen as the traditional core parties, do you think that might be reflected in the voting patterns now in rural communities?
I do, is the short answer. Young people certainly don't vote the way their parents did. They probably don't even know how their parents voted, and they wouldn't vote for that way anyway. And there is dissatisfaction, I think, across the youth vote, whether it's rural or urban. I mean, housing, of course, is a huge issue. Um, People paying astronomical amounts for rents and not being able to get on the housing ladder and really having no chance.
And rural planning has been a problem because people can't build on family land. There's been really strong issues, and that's
The famous
across
once-off housing, yes,
the
that's
once
been
off housing. That's been a massive
that's
issue.
been a
And
massive issue.
and actually, all political, from what we can see, there hasn't really been a lot on that. I know that we've had promises in recent days that that may be looked at. But when you talk to any of the major farming organisations, that's a key issue for them and a key demand.
It is, and one can see why it would be. I mean, in rural Ireland, you had Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, but now you in rural Ireland, you have a lesser Fianna Fáil, a lesser Fine Gael, you have a stronger Sinn Féin. And you've got look at someone like Claire Curran in Roscommon,
Roscommon.
or look at someone like Martin Kenny in Sligo Leitrim. Look at Martin Brown in Tipperary, who won in 2020, where Fine Gael have no seat in the great heartland of the Golden Vale. If you look at Pa Daly in Kerry, so Sinn Féin have broken through on in rural Ireland. You look at how strong they are in places like Cavan Monaghan. Independents are strong. We talked about Michael Fitzmaurice, the Healy Rays, the Matt Shanahans, Richard O'Donoghue's of these world. They're being elected because people are dissatisfied with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. That dissatisfaction runs on a macro level with the crash, as we talked earlier, Francis, but then it runs on a micro level. Oh, why can't I build a house on my land for my child? Why is my child still living with me? If I live in I don't know, Skull, and why do my children have to emigrate? Why do they have to go west to the States? Why do they have to go to Australia? Why do they have to go to Dublin, God forbid, as distinct from where's the future for them here? And that is a big issue, I think, to sort of John Healy years ago wrote about the death of small town Mayo. That still resonates, though. That idea of that small town rural Ireland is suffering and didn't benefit from the Celtic Tiger, and isn't benefiting now from the macroeconomic situation that Simon Harris lauds of full employment and the like.
And I think sometimes when you drive through these rural towns and you see houses, shops boarded up as you're driving through the main street, and you're wondering, like, where is the future for that? And I think when we've been out and about and we've been hearing from farmers saying that they want to see investment in local areas, they're talking about investment issues, rural housing, climate environment pressures. Those are issues which resonate with farmers regardless of whatever part you are in the country. So do you think that will be a vote decider?
It could be. I mean, because if you're, as I said, with loyalty gone, and if you're dissatisfied with, I mean, just on a macro level with government policy, but then you're feeling it either in your own pocket with the price you're getting for your produce, or the price you have to pay. And this has been a huge issue, inflation in the rural economy, just the cost of living. Well, then, and this is what's happened, Francis. We're now seeing the two main parties struggling to get 20% each. Now, another issue is, not to go off the point, but I think it's tangential to it, is a lot of people are so dissatisfied they won't vote. We had about 62% voted in 2020. That is down from about 75% just a generation earlier in the 80s. I first voted in 1987, and I think the turnout was something like 73 or 4%. It was even higher in the early 80s. during the Haughey Fitzgerald era. The inner cities, the vote is even less. But in rural Ireland, I mean, if you're getting 65%, you're doing well. And that's a third of people not voting. No, the register is still a bit of a mess. Some people are on it who are dead. Some people are on it who have emigrated. It's not the most reliable indicator in one way. But there is something wrong, I think, in the Irish state if we have a third of the people who think,
I don't want to vote.
And I don't know, have you seen it when you're around? But I couldn't be bothered voting, so none of them will do anything for me. No, that's a very bad idea. If you want to influence the shape of the next government, although we're obviously not going to have an overall majority, but if you want to influence politics in this country, you have a chance once every 4 or 5 years was at a general election. And whether you're in rural Mayo or inner city Dublin or Cork, or you're up in the border or down in the deepest southwest, you have to vote.
Yeah. And just talk to us a little bit about the numbers. What does it take to get over the line? Because as you say, it's going to be a different, we have more seats.
It takes a lot. So we now have 174 seats in the current election to be fought in 43 different constituencies of 3, 4 and 5 seats. That is up from 160 in 2020. So there are 14 extra seats. There are some new constituencies, Wicklow, Wexford being one of them. There's been some moves by the Electoral Commission. So, for instance, all of Offaly is now Offaly, as GAA people would know it. Offaly and nowhere else. Laois is the same. Laois Offaly was a constituency at one stage. We had Donegal, North East and South West. As you know, we have Donegal for the past few years. It's just the territory of Donegal, again in GAA terms. So 174 seats. That means, so if you literally divide it by 2 and add 1, you need 88 seats for a majority. And I think this is a problem for Sinn Féin. If Fianna Fáil and Micheál Martin on Tuesday's debate in RT ruled out once more going into power with Sinn Féin, and Simon Harris has done the same for Fine Gael. So, and Mary Lou McDonald wants to be Taoiseach without Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. So they have 37 seats or so. 88 is the magic number. Even on a good day, if they got 47 seats, which would be a great day's work, would be a significant increase. They're still 40 seats away without Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. So where would they get those 40 seats? They could coalesce with the Social Democrats, or the Greens, or People Before Profit, or Independents, Independent Ireland, or Aontú. We haven't touched, but I know Peadar Tobin has been very strong again on sort of death of rural Ireland narrative, and he and his party have some ideas there, but he's the only TD. They could get 1 or 2 more, but they're unlikely to get more than 3 or 4. So can you put a government together out of that 5 or 6 party, or those 5 or 6 parties and independents? I mean, the golden rule in one way: the less numbers in a coalition, the better for its cohesion. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens, you could oppose it, but it's lasted for 4 years and 4.5 years, June of 2022 to now. It's not to say it's impossible, and the more seats Sinn Féin win, the bigger their chances are. But their chances are slim, it seems to me, still, if Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael say no. There are talks in Fianna, or the people who own Fianna Fáil would say that if we were to do particularly poorly, get rid of Micheál Martin, and so another leader might bring us in with Sinn Féin. But like, if you're going in as a minor party like Labour did, like the Progressive Democrats, the results can be pretty bad, pretty difficult. And I mean, Micheál Martin certainly in 2020 said he wouldn't go into Fine Gael, and then he did. He says now, COVID circumstances, having to step up to the plate, but he seems adamant that he's not going in with Sinn Féin. Simon Harris is the same. So then you say, how does Sinn Féin get to 88? And that's a difficult trek. In other words, if we have 2 of the 3 main parties, you would have to coalesce to give some stability of then getting a third leg to that coalition stool to form a government. And for one of the 3 of them to do it without one of the others is very difficult, I think.
Yeah, so still all to play for now.
I think so, certainly.
And it's really a kind of watch and wait to see who's going to be the 174 TDs.
It is, and I think in rural Ireland and where farming communities, I will be interested to see, does it stick? Do those who have traditionally voted Fine Gael stick with them, or will they be saying Fine Gael have been in power for too long? And Fine Gael now, they're going for their fourth time in power. Now the vote has went significantly down from 76 in 2011 to 35 just 2 elections later in 2020. And on their current polling, they might hold those 35, maybe gain 1 or 2, or on a bad day go down to, they got 31 for instance in 2002, go down to like the low 30s. Ireland has become dissatisfied with Fine Gael, certainly, because it's felt it hasn't done enough. And I'll be interested to see, does its residual strength in rural Ireland help it to maintain that sort of 20-odd%, or will it dissipate again? And then I will also be interested to see how independents do, because we've touched on those who have been elected already, but I think there are probably a couple others. I would say Eddie Punchin-Clare, for instance, former head of the ICSA, who didn't poll tremendously well in the European elections, but I would think he must stand a chance in Clare. He's well known. We talked about the sort of name recognition. And so you could see people like him being elected, and those who we don't know, because there's always a few surprises. And
sometimes the polls are wrong.
Sometimes the polls are wrong, and I mean there was so we're going to have an exit poll on Friday night in RTE, in RTE Irish Times TG4 one. It was out slightly by about a point or two for Sinn Féin and Fine Gael. Sinn Féin had too low, Fine Gael had too high. So even exit polls can be wrong. And I would say in an era of extraordinary political volatility, the best way to make a difference is to vote.
Well, Agriland will be following the results of the general election across the weekend, so stay tuned online and on the Agriland app. And for now, I want to say a really special thanks to Gary Murphy, Professor at Dublin City University School of Law and Government, for sharing all his expertise and knowledge. Thanks for listening, and please don't forget to rate, review this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us.
This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to axa.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.